Hey there, everyone. I'm going to double check to make sure we are live. So I know the one time I don't check that we're live, there will be a mistake. It looks like we are up, which is a great thing. So, hey there, I'm Jason Logston, and this is Makin Bacon, all about helping you serve your fans, grow your income, and get the most out of your blog. As bloggers, we already write recipes, we take photographs, and we know how to connect with our readers. It's some pretty standard blogging stuff. But if you suggest putting out a cookbook, many people get really, really nervous. And it can definitely be a challenging experience if you haven't done it before. But today's guest is the perfect person to help us out. She has been food blogging for almost 10 years, and what started as a blog to help her fellow college students learn how to cook has turned into a blog that helps home cooks nail cooking in their own kitchens through simple recipes and techniques like sous vide, one of my favorites. She's also the author of Everyday Sous Vide, It's All French to Me, and teaches fellow food bloggers how to self-publish cookbooks of their own. I can't wait to learn from today's guest, Chelsea Cole from A Duck's Oven. Chelsea, welcome to Makin Bacon.
Hi, it's so great to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's nice to have another conversation with you. Chelsea and I had a good conversation on the Exploring Sous Vide podcast, all about sous vide, which was very fun. So I thought she'd have a lot to share with all of you and wanted to bring her here. If you're listening, you're out there, say hi in the comments. Let us know where you are and what you've been working on lately in your blog, and ask any questions you have throughout the interview, and I will pass them along to Chelsea. So I can't wait to dive into cookbook publishing. But before we get started, I always like to ask, what is it like around your dinner table on a typical day?
Yes. Okay. Great question. It's finally feeling like it's kind of back to pre-quarantine, like normalcy. So almost always I try on weeknights, I try to do something that I know I can do in a half hour or less. Like admittedly now, since I'm home during the day, I'll let that, be a little bit longer. But I really love simple foods. If I can find little hacks to make things easier, I take advantage of them. There's no shame in that. So for example, I use sous vide as a cooking hack. I can throw, for example, a steak or chicken in there, let it do its thing for a couple hours. And then when I'm ready, it's ready. And I'm not like, working around its time. But typically like last night, it's stuff like street tacos, or tonight we're having miso noodles. And I try to do things with a lot of flavor, but aren't super complex.
I love that idea of using sous vide to make cooking easier. I feel like sous vide got its start, in industrial cooking, and then it moved to like gourmet restaurants, and, Thomas Keller is doing amazing things with it, and people associate it with this gourmet high-end style of food, which you can definitely use it for. But the convenience factor of it just makes meal prep and makes like stress-free cooking so amazing. It's something I love about it.
Yes. Then honestly, like that's my approach to sous vide. When I discovered sous vide and kind of came into the space, I found it to be a little more stuffy, as we might say. And I was like, nope, this just makes my life easier. I want to show other people how it can make their lives easier too.
Yeah, that's how I got my start blogging, was trying to learn sous vide and failing, and then figuring out for myself and being like, okay, yeah, thermal depth curves are interesting, but you really just need to know that you have to cook this for 2 hours and you're done. You don't need to understand the science any more than you do to like use instant pancake mix, which is a wonder of science, but it's easy.
Yep, exactly. That's my approach as well.
You mentioned this before, but I wanted to make sure people know if they want to get a hold of you. What's your favorite social media site to use to connect with people?
Yeah, it is Instagram by far. And so I am A Duck's Oven on Instagram, and please come talk to me. I am in my DMs way more often than I should be. And I love it there.
Mike is joining us. He also is with the ISVA. So A Duck's Oven, I know the answer to this question, but I think a lot of people listening don't. Is it a duck cooking? What is A Duck's Oven? Where'd that name come from?
It gets confused with that a lot. And honestly, there have been times where I've been like, should I change this? Because it's kind of confusing, but I've just stuck with it for the past 10 years. No, I started my blog while I was a sophomore at the University of Oregon, and their mascot is the Ducks. And so my husband, actually now husband, then boyfriend, named my blog And it was supposed to be a play on Dutch oven. So a duck's oven instead of Dutch oven.
I think it's so unique, and that's something that a lot of food bloggers don't have. Like my original site was cooking sous vide, which is not memorable in any way. People would confuse it with, what is it? You run the making sous vide site, and I'm like, no, it's cooking soup. No one remembers. We're a duck's oven. Like they're like, what? I need to learn more about this, and you pull them in.
Totally, exactly.
That's that. I mean, as bloggers, that's super important to kind of have a catch and.
And have a thing that you are known for. Yeah. In fact, I, as you say that, like the people I'm thinking about whose Instagram handles and blogs, I know off the top of my head, they're unique names. If they're generic, there's no hope of me remembering.
Yep. Yeah, that's a good point. So there's your lesson for the day, listeners, is make sure that you have a unique name. And if you don't, you should just give up blogging entirely, right? You're
exactly. Just be done. No.
There's a lot of other things you can do to stand out to everyone. So you should be just fine. So I want to dive into self-publishing. It's something that I love talking about. It's a favorite topic of mine. And you self-published your book, Everyday Sous Vide. Why did you decide to go that route?
So I had thought about, I think as food bloggers, a long-term dream is to write a cookbook. And I had been thinking about it for a long time and never had really found a topic that I felt was suited to me writing a book about. I kind of blogged generically for a really long time. It was all centered around simplicity, but there wasn't anything more than that. It wasn't like vegan desserts or, something like that. And so when I got really into sous vide cooking, I was like, whoa, this is not a really well-known thing yet. It's totally changed my life in my own kitchen. And one thing I quickly discovered is that there are very few women in the sous vide space. It's really male dominated in that space. And I was like, I feel like this is a place where I could stand out and a book that I made would do well. And honestly, the reason I went with self-publishing is because 1, I'm cheap and 2, I am impatient. And so I did not want to try to hire an agent. I did not want to wait years or, to find a publishing house that would publish this book. I had a really good feeling about it and felt like it would be successful. And I wanted to just do it. And so I did. I made the decision to do it. And then within 6 months, my book was done, which if you go the traditional route, it takes at least a couple of years for that to happen. So honestly, those were the main reasons that I went with self-publishing.
I think one of the most frustrating things with traditional publishing is you might still write your manuscript in 6 months, but then it takes another 6 to 12 months for it to actually show up online. And I'm like, I've published 12 cookbooks. I know that I can have this on Amazon in 3 days.
Yes.
Come on. Christmas is still 3 months away. Why is this book not going to be out for Christmas? What is wrong with you?
It's wild to me. And honestly, since that experience, I've learned so much more about both self-publishing and traditional publishing. I've become friends with Diane Morgan, who is a cookbook author and she lives here in Portland, and she's written 18 cookbooks, and all of them have been traditionally published. And she has been so generous sharing her knowledge and her time with me. And she told me, I would never traditionally publish again. I've had such bad experiences with publishing houses and with agents. I just want I want control and creative license over my book, and you give that up when you traditionally publish. And so that was honestly something I had considered it, but that wasn't one of the driving factors. And now for me, I'm like, oh, I don't think I would ever traditionally publish a book. I'm kind of curious about it, so I might, but because I don't want to give up creative control.
Yeah, that was definitely the most frustrating aspect of my 2 traditionally published books were butting heads with the editors or with the publisher. My one is the official Instapot sous vide cookbook. Yeah. And I was like, do we want to call it that? People get confused. They think Instapot is a piece of equipment, which is not. It's a brand name, but they think it's a pressure cooker. And they're like, no, we talked to Instapot and they know that's not true. And I was like, you're all the experts. And it came out in the first probably 10 reviews that weren't 4 or 5 star reviews were all, I don't know how to use my Instapot to make this. It just does pressure cooking. I'm like,
yep. Mm-hmm. Oh. And that's the type of thing where it's you had that gut feeling. And the thing, I know that of course publishing houses have so much expertise that I don't have. But I have a different type of expertise, and I spend so much time talking to my audience that I also feel like I really know what they're looking for in something. And so I think that there's, of course, a benefit to combining both of those skill sets, but a lot of times yours, gets tossed aside. So yeah, that's a great point.
I feel like, what did you think the hardest part of publishing your book was?
Oh man, I think one thing that's both a blessing and a curse, at least for somebody like me, is the fact that I am on my own timeline. So, I would have moments where or I guess weeks rather, where I was obsessive and like that was all I worked on. But then there would be a week or two where I totally slacked off and did nothing related to it. And so there's a lot of self-management that can be difficult, especially like I tend to take on a lot at any given time. So I work a full-time job. I have my food blog. I freelance. I do some property management. Like I do 1,000 different things. And so like I will just find myself honing in on one thing and not being able to really multitask. So that was probably the hardest part for me. It was just literally managing myself.
I'll people ask me, so how do you like keep up with your blog while you write a cookbook? And I'm like, I don't know. I like sat down and like spent 3 months writing recipes only for my cookbook and basically forgot about my blog for 3 or 4 months.
I actually just recorded a reel for Instagram about that exact topic, because that's a question I've gotten so many times. Like, how do you do all the things? And I'm like, and one thing I really want people to know is that it's okay to slow down. Like, you can't do everything at once. So if you usually post on your blog once a week, it's okay for a little bit if you only post twice a month. Like, I think people who are working towards this really feel like they have to do things a certain way. And of course it's like better, right? It's going to be better for you're going to get more traffic if you're posting more frequently. But if you're giving up a little bit of your time to work on something like self-publishing a cookbook, then that's going to really, really help you out and help your blog out in the long run. So it's okay to give and take a little.
Yeah. That's one thing I talk about too, is like, yeah, you're supposed to publish on a schedule. You're supposed to do this consistent. You're supposed to do a lot of things. And like you said, you might be maximizing your results if you're doing that. But if you're dropped to twice a month instead of, once a week, you might be knocking like 2% or 5% off of your potential growth, but you're putting out a freaking cookbook, which is going to be a lot more valuable than that little bit you might, be keeping.
Exactly.
I wanted to, I just completely lost my train of thought there. I had a great question. You all are missing out on what was going to be the perfect question. One thing that did you reuse any of your recipes on your blog that were in your book?
I actually did the reverse. So I did all the recipes for my book. None of that was on my blog, other than like technique, because obviously with sous vide, so much of it is about time and temp. And so that gets reused for the book. But I actually, as a teaser for my book, would publish a recipe from the book on my blog later after it was launched, and then say, hey, and there's more recipes like this in my book. But no, I didn't do it the other way around. I also don't think there's anything wrong with doing it the other way around. So for example, if you have a bunch of recipes on your blog that would translate really well to the cookbook topic you have, you can totally use them. I think the nice thing about a cookbook is not that they're novel recipes. It's that there are all these recipes in this one spot. And cookbooks too, like one thing I've been talking to a ton of people lately who are thinking of self-publishing and kind of talking to them about what their topic might be. And one thing I love seeing is a bunch of them are considering doing cookbooks that are less just recipes, but have more stories in them or go really in depth on a technique or tips or something like that. So it's a little more loaded. And so the value that you get from a cookbook, again, is not like an individual recipe. It's the collection. It's the point of your book. Like I buy cookbooks that change my cooking style, that I learn like new things that I can apply to all of my cooking. So if that's helpful for folks when thinking about this.
I think that's two great points. I love your second point there of, it doesn't have to just be a collection of random recipes or even curated recipes. My first cookbooks that were a lot more successful were how to sous vide. And they taught you, from someone that wouldn't understand sous vide, how to get through and understand sous vide, or how to use a whipping siphon. And the cookbooks that I still reach for and that I remember the most are things like Michael Ruhlman's Ratio, which taught me the ratios of baking and how they work, and the artisanal bread book that taught me the basics of bread baking. And I might have only used a tenth or of the recipes that are in that book, but it changed how I approach cooking. And they're not filled with glossy photos. Those were not filled with like amazing things. They were filled with great information, which changed how I cook.
Yep, exactly. Like, I mean, same thing for me. So when I was in the early stages of my cookbook, I literally just got all of my favorite cookbooks, and I thought about, and I like literally made lists of why these were considered a favorite of mine. And so it was, and that included books like Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat, which is not a traditional cookbook at all. It's mostly words with very few recipes. And then also included books like Milk Bar, because she taught me, like you said, kind of the fundamentals of baking cookies and things I just didn't know before. And it's less about the individual recipes, but it totally changes my approach to baking. So yeah, exactly.
I think there's a lot of food bloggers or bloggers in general that get into, like, they hear cookbook and they think a bunch of recipes, and they might think, I'm not that good at recipes. That's not everyone's strength. It's coming up with really unique recipes that people are going to love, and having that point of view and that storytelling, they might be a lot better at. And that's a way that you can really stand out from, like, if you're doing simple food, like competing with Rachel Ray's 30-minute meals is a lot harder than writing about what it means to you and your philosophy of simple eating with a smattering of recipes in it.
Yes, exactly. Yes, there's so much you can do to be creative.
And your point about reusing the recipes, I feel the exact same way. That I never had anyone complain about seeing a recipe from my cookbook on the blog or in any other format. They like having something that they can hold, and so they bought a cookbook. And otherwise, I've done both, whether I release the recipes first or release them afterwards. Once I caught up to all the recipes on my blog, I had to start releasing them after the books came out. But that was one of the ways that I eventually could keep up with my blog, is that I was reusing recipes from my cookbooks that were the best recipes. And talking about always trying to sell yourself, putting out those recipes and like, oh, you want 98 other recipes like this one? Check out my book. You can go buy that right now. And it's not a salesy in your face way, but it's you just cook something from me that you really like. There's more of this out there if you're interested.
Exactly. Yes. That's the exact same approach I use too. And I think it's like a lot of course creators that I see now, they'll say things like, yes, you could find everything that's in this course on the internet for free. But the value of this course is that we have it all in one spot, and we are showing you how to use the information, and we're teaching you an order in which to use it. And so I think the same philosophy can be applied to a cookbook. As
bloggers and creators, we get we know what our website is. We know what is on all of our social media channels. We know what we've written and what we've talked about. And so we think our fans do as well. And they have no idea what is out there most of the time.
It is like I was complaining to my husband the other day because I'd been posting about something, and I was like, why are people not like talking to me about this more? I'm upset that people aren't, don't have more questions, blah, blah, blah. And so I had just done like a long story series about it and a post on Instagram. And then I got like literally 3 DMs being like, I hadn't heard about this before. Like, this is so cool. And I was like, I've been talking about this for like a month. So you just like never know what people are going to catch. And like you said, nobody knows your entire recipe catalog. So it's going to be fine.
This came up in my mastermind call earlier today, that someone was saying, well, what if I post the same content on like Facebook and Instagram? Will people get upset if they see it both places? And I was like, if I get to the point where someone reaches out and is like, you've posted this on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and on your blog, and I'm tired of hearing it, like, they are a super fan that I'm glad I now get to interact with them, because they probably know more about what I'm doing than I do.
Yep, totally. And I think those all those are probably different people anyways, like different users. And so, yeah, I think that's one thing that bloggers tend to really overthink. And that's something I've even had to overcome recently, especially when it comes to self-promotion, is not being afraid of saying the same thing over and over and over and over again. And of course, when you do self-promote, do it in a way that's approachable and doesn't make you feel smarmy. But don't be afraid of doing it a lot because people don't know. Like I recently had somebody who's followed me for a really long time be like, oh, I didn't know you wrote a cookbook. And I'm like, I don't, what? Okay. That's good for me to know.
We have a sous vide timing ruler that is a plastic ruler that you can hold up next to your tender cuts and it'll tell you like the time and temperature you need to cook it. And like every 2 months, probably we do an ad for it in our newsletter and we sell like 1 to 200 of them from that newsletter. And we're not adding that many new people that it's not like 10% of our 30,000 people we added over those 2 months. It's just people that never knew that we had that, even though we post about it and talk about it a lot, but like just sticking it out there in front of them. They're like, oh yeah, I'm interested in this now. And they're not complaining about like you're overselling or anything.
Yes. Yeah. One of my favorite, by my day job is marketing, which it comes in very handy for the rest of my efforts. But one of my favorite like marketing phrases is repetition for recognition. So you have to put the same thing in front of people for a really long time. Like that's why, for work, if I run an ad, I'm not going to call it a failure after 7 days. Like I'm going to watch that thing for a month and see how it goes. And, that's, you just got to repeat yourself 1,000 times and then it'll stick in people's heads.
I think it's hard for us to keep that in mind. We always come up with a new article, a new course, a new book, whatever. We're like super excited and send it out and it doesn't have the response that we want. And we forget that half the people probably even notice that we mentioned it. And the majority of the rest probably just didn't click for them in that specific moment. And you need to keep in a very, in my opinion, a very non-salesy way, continue to remind them that this content is out there. If they're interested in it, you should check it out. And eventually they're like, oh, I didn't know, like you said, I didn't know that you have a cookbook. It's like, okay.
Oh, okay. Yeah, exactly. No, literally exactly. Yep. Mm-hmm.
My mom wanted to know what the name of the cookbook that you mentioned that changed your cookie baking perspective. I would also like you to share that information with my mother because I would like
yes, more right? No kidding. You can benefit directly. Milk Bar. So that is, it's the same Milk Bar that's really famous in New York City, the cookie shop. And so Christina, I'm blanking on her last name. She wrote a cookbook just about her cooking, baking method because it became such a phenomenon in New York City. And I love the cookies.
We have one right around the corner from us. It's been on our list to check it out. And then, we don't go out right now, but
right. Mm-hmm, yeah.
Some undetermined time in the future, we will go there and check it out.
Fingers crossed. Yeah.
What sort of trade-offs did you have to make as you worked on publishing your book?
Oh man, I don't know how I do this to myself. I think sometimes I'm most high functioning when I'm so busy, I can't think straight. But when I started, my husband and I were at the very end of finishing building our home that we've been working on for like 3 years. Which I'm like, why I'm doing this now is beyond me. But frankly, it was a lot of social time. So I just kind of told my friends, I'm so sorry, but I'm not going to be able to give you as much of my love as I usually like to give you for the next couple of months. And I'm going to be really like head down focused on this. And most of them were supportive. Frankly, I did have one friend who was not so supportive. And I hope for everybody else that your family's really supportive. But that was like the largest thing. And then I tend to have a lot of projects going at once. And I really had to make a concerted effort to just not take on anything new, just to work on the book and to keep going. And there are a lot of times and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this. For me, when a project that I was super excited about in the beginning becomes less shiny, a lot of times I'll lose interest in it and not want to put my head down and focus. And so I had people around me though, like my husband, who were very helpful in pushing me and keeping me going. But yeah, so for me, it was a lot of just like forcing myself to focus. And then other than that, I mean, it wasn't a lot of trade-off. There's trade-offs certainly versus traditional publishing and self-publishing. For example, with self-publishing, I don't get as big of distribution and I had to learn everything on my own. So if you do the traditional publishing route, you're responsible for creating the recipes, writing the content, sometimes photographing the book, and then the rest is up to the publishing house. I had to learn how to self-publish. I had to learn what goes into a book. It's a lot different than a blog. And so there was a lot of that, but I'm really grateful for the experience. And I and I like doing that. So it was fine.
I always like to say with self-publishing, you have total control. And that
Yes.
means you have total control and have to decide everything.
Exactly. Yep.
How did you determine what to price your book at? This is something that everyone struggles with and tries to figure out the magic price that's going to work best for pretty much anything you put out there. What was your approach?
There is no magic price. I've actually changed my price a couple times. So I was a little careful. So one thing you'll learn if you dive into the self-publishing world is you'll learn about ISBNs. So I made a point of, and that's essentially just the barcode that's on your book. So I made a point of buying my own ISBN. So when you self-publish through Amazon, they will provide you with a free ISBN if you want. But if you do that, you can only publish your book on Amazon. And I didn't want to be restricted to that. However, I was nervous about the pricing. I didn't know anything about it. And so a lot of times you put your price as part of the ISBN. So it's like in the same little barcode area. I chose not to do that to give myself flexibility of pricing. Retailers don't love that, just as a heads up. But I was more focused on selling online. So that was fine. So I used the KDP royalty calculator. So Amazon KDP is how I self-published my book. The platform is Kindle Direct Publishing. And even though it's called that, that's now how you publish a physical book as well. And so I used their royalty calculator and was like, what am I cool with? And then I actually do price differently for live events. So if I do live events in a normal, like you said, it not right now, but most of the time I do a lot of live events where I'm like at a farmer's market cooking and people can buy my book. Or I go, Portland has like so many cool outdoor markets and I get booths at them all the time. So I tend to sell my book for less there because I can keep way more of the royalty of the cost. So for me, it was just like, I literally just pushed it to what do I think people are going to be comfortable buying with or buying this book for. So I can take home a good chunk. And yeah, it's just comfort. It's like pricing your freelancing or, it's like pricing anything else.
Yeah, you just kind of roll the dice and hope that you're somewhere in the right realm of what makes sense.
Exactly. Yep. Mm-hmm.
My biggest surprise in pricing was with my Whipping Siphon book. It was a shorter book, so we priced it less. And we thought, you know what, maybe we should try increasing this and we'll probably lose a little bit of sales, but it might be worth it. And in the long term, we'll make a little bit more money because we'll be, have another $2 profit. And we increased the price, I think like $5, and our sales actually went up because people viewed it as a more valuable book because it costs more. We're like, great, now we're making more profit and we're selling more copies. Like, why didn't we do this before?
Yeah, there's so much psychology in pricing. Like, I think it's probably like, I think the minutia of like, should it end in 77 or 98 is probably less so for an item that's going to be less than $50. But I mean, yeah, it's so funny because if you price anything too low, people are going to assume it's cheap and not good. And so I think, yeah, that's a great thing to keep in mind.
So making money is obviously a nice outcome that you can have from self-publishing a book. What other good outcomes came from you having a cookbook under your name? My career as a food blogger completely changed after I self-published a book. People were just, it gave people a reason to talk to me. Like, it's really as simple as that. So I went on several podcasts after I self-published. Which got my name out there. And so I got a lot more followers on Instagram and stuff like that from things like that. And then one of the things that was most exciting for me, so I self-published, and one of the best parts of self-publishing was the way people supported me after I published my book. And so the community, I love Portland so much. I'm from Portland, Oregon, and the food community here was so supportive to me. They welcomed me with open arms when I self-published. So I had a coffee with this woman who is in PR here in Portland. And she literally gave me contact info for some of her best TV producers and stuff like that. And so I reached out to these TV producers locally, and I thought it was a long shot. I was like, nobody's going to care, blah, blah, blah. And I remember I got an email response being like, yeah, can you come on Tuesday? And I was at work when I got it, and I just started crying because I couldn't imagine that anybody would want me on their TV show. It was crazy to me. And so I got to go on live TV right after I published my book.
And since then, I have done probably, I don't know, a dozen live TV segments because I had a good experience with them and they keep inviting me back. So if they have a slot to fill, they just hit me up and are like, hey, can you come in on this day? And I'm like, yes. And every single time I go on TV, I sell a lot of books. So it's really worth it for me. And I've gotten to know people like I didn't do as part of self. So one thing that people think about with publishing a cookbook is like a book tour. What they don't know is that often the cost of touring, even when you traditionally publish, comes out of your own pocket. It comes out of your advance. So I self-published, so I didn't choose to do any big tour. I could have. I think it would have been fun. But I did do a lot of things here in Portland. And so I got to do all these markets. We have something called the Portland Night Market here where it's like local vendors like jam and plants and things like that. And I did a bunch of those. And although they aren't like awesome for selling my book, like I'm usually thrilled if I sell like 10 in a night because my book is so niche-y. Like not everybody knows what sous vide is. I get to talk to people and they get to know me and they ask me a lot of questions and they, again, follow me on Instagram or whatever, and we stay in touch. And so that my name just being able to get out into the world and again, giving people a reason to talk to me has been phenomenal. So I'm doing more stuff like this.
Live television, and being on my show, about equal things.
Yeah.
Sally Eckes is a literary agent, and she always says that money is nice, but she views cookbooks as the world's best business card.
Exactly. I totally, like, one thing I kind of warn people about is like, you need to not be writing a cookbook for the money because you're going to be disappointed. Like, sure, you make a little bit of passive income. You're certainly going to make back, the money you've spent putting into it, but it's not crazy. And so it's more just, it gives you credibility and authority in your space. And you just get a lot more exposure because of it.
Yeah, helps move forward your other food blogger goals most of the time.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Did you do most of the work yourself? Did you work with a team or hire anyone? How did your kind of process go for creating the book?
So I am frugal. So I tried to do as much of it myself as I possibly could. So things I didn't do. But that line ends at, I need to have an expert at least review what I did, or this is not my expertise and this is a book that I want people to be thrilled they bought. And so I need somebody's help with this. So I have basic graphic design skills, but I am not a graphic designer. So I hired my really good friend who is a graphic designer to do the cover and back of my book. And then she is awesome. She looked through all of KDP's requirements for the PDF that you upload to publish. And she created a template for me in InDesign. And then I paid her to make the template, but not to design the whole book. And so then I went in and filled out the template. So it was kind of like, it was cost saving, but I made sure I was doing it right. So stuff like that. And then my editing process was I hired somebody who knew recipe writing to edit my recipes. So that was separate. And then I hired a friend who does freelance editing to edit the written portions of my book. Once I was positive it was perfect, which of course it wasn't. So I was careful about those things. And then I did all the photography myself, which I think a lot of food bloggers do that now. But I had my mom come over and she would do my dishes and help prep the next recipe and all that stuff on really long shoot days. So I could bang out, I remember one day we did 8 shoots in a day, which for me is unheard of. And so she was really, really helpful for that. And the only cost to me for that was lunch. So that was really great, but I really tried to do as much of it myself as I possibly could. So it was pretty much a solo act.
I see. I did. My parents helped me proofread it there because we were in the company together. But everything else I did myself as well the first time. And my more recent books are definitely look a lot more better designed and a better photography now that I've been doing this for a decade instead of 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
So it's helped a lot. But I was kind of the same as you. That I approached it as I want to learn what I'm doing first, and then kind of dive in and I was open to hiring help if I needed it, but I found that I enjoy learning new things, at least the first few times. And I had fun diving into it.
Yep, totally. And I just thought of something else I should add too. I developed all my recipes and tested them a couple of times myself, but then I also, as part of the recipe editing process, again, community is amazing. And in all these sous vide Facebook groups that I'm a member of, I asked people like, hey, would you be willing to test some recipes for me? And I had a ton of people sign up and they all did that for free. So they tested recipes for me and gave me feedback, which was phenomenal. So that was one element where I brought other people in, but it didn't cost me anything.
It's amazing how much you miss when you're just doing your own stuff, and having another set of eyes on it or another set of hands on it is invaluable.
Yeah. It's there's a lot of things that maybe make sense to you, but aren't going to make sense to somebody else. And so it's really good to know those things. If you do, the great thing about your blog is if you post a recipe that is clear to you, but maybe not clear to somebody else, they'll just leave a comment and you can respond to the comment and then edit your recipe. You can't do that with a book. So you got to make sure it's really clear and good from the beginning.
Yeah, we always forget what we don't know that we know, kind of, or that we know more than we think that we remember, and we forget how much a basic person doesn't know about cooking, especially if you're teaching them a method that they're not familiar with.
Yep, exactly. That was my experience as well.
I liked your concept of bringing on people to do stuff like the cover and to help give you a good design, but then doing a lot of the legwork yourself when you have the time to do it and more limited funds. It's a great way to do it. And spending your money on something like the cover, which is going to directly affect book sales because it's the only thing they see on Amazon in a lot of cases, like you're going to make your money back on that much, much faster than, paying someone to design your table of contents or something.
Exactly. And it's really, and that's the great thing about self-publishing is you're in charge of the costs. And so I've had so many people ask, like, what did it cost you to self-publish? And so I actually created a little calculator that's like, here were all of my costs. You decide what you are willing to do and what your budget is for each thing. Obviously, the more you spend, the better quality of something usually you're gonna get. Just so people can have like a grasp of what it's going to cost them. And because I think it's probably more than people end up expecting to spend. The ISBNs alone, you can either buy one for, what is it, like $145 or something like that, or you can buy 10 for $295. And I bought 10 because I did a Kindle version of my book, which requires a different ISBN. And I knew that I'd probably write another book. So if I had them, like, okay, great. But that's a cost people don't expect. And then I always tell people to remember things like the subscription to the Adobe Suite. And like you're going to save money on groceries if you go to Trader Joe's instead of Whole Foods. And, there's all these little things that people just have to consider. But you're going to shell out a little bit of your own money to do it.
That's the other nice thing about reusing some of those recipes for your blog is you're not double spending. It's money that you would have had to spend anyway, at least for ingredients and for, your time and some stuff like that, which makes it a little more palatable.
Yep, totally. Exactly.
Yeah. The ISBNs you mentioned that before, and I wanted to touch on that again. That's so, in my opinion, it's so critical to get your own. So it basically means, do you have control over your book or do you not have control over your book? And you went through all the hassle of self-publishing your own book, and you can spend $100 to completely maintain control over whatever you want to do with it, or you can give that up. Like, to me, it's a no-brainer. You should always have your own ISBN, and it's never use Amazon's, the one that they provide, in my opinion.
Oh, I am in 100% agreement. Like, do not, like, you have to be able to own your book. Because even though retail was not a big part of my marketing strategy, I have sold my book in stores, and I wouldn't have been able to do that if I had just gotten Amazon's ISBN. And it's so worth the upfront cost in the long run. Like, that is not one place to pinch pennies. Pinch pennies in other places, that's not it.
Yep. I do a lot of wholesaling, which having my own ISBN is critical too. That I work with some different manufacturers of sous vide equipment and places that sell modernist ingredients, and they'll sell my book on their website, and I'll sell them 50 or 500 copies up front. And not having my own ISBN would make that very hard, or I'd have to have a separate version of it to publish, and then sales don't translate, which is weird and just gets even more confusing.
Yep, totally. Mm-hmm.
I like your idea of selling your book at farmers markets and fairs and things in your area. It's something I've never done, but it's a great way that, not everyone buys on Amazon. And especially if you're connected in the community, it's a great way to get in front of a lot of people that are going to be more likely to buy from someone they know.
Yes. And I think this would probably be the case with a lot of food bloggers, just like knowing their personalities and things like that. But one thing that was amazing about self-publishing my book is I was stunned to learn how much I love public speaking. And not even just like I'm on a stage, like style public speaking, but like things like this, or going out into my community and talking with folks and explaining sous vide in person. I love it. It's so fun. So again, even though those events aren't like making me a ton of money or whatever, I think it's a great opportunity to just get to know people and get in front of people. And they are going to be the people who recommend your book to their friends and family. And like, because they get this personal interaction with you, and it's so fun and so cool. And that has been such a rewarding experience.
I also think that there's some things that you can do at bloggers to make a lot of money that you never work with anyone else. But a lot of the successful outcomes in blogging are working with brands or becoming a brand manager or the director of marketing for a brand or doing television appearances. There's all these things that involve other people, and using your cookbook and getting out there into the communities and expanding your network and meeting people is where a lot of these opportunities come from, that you're going to start hearing of new opportunities because you know more people that are connected to the industry that you're in. And so just having that book allows you to kind of get your foot in that door, and then going out there and purposely meeting a bunch of people really opens up your future options a whole lot more.
Oh, I mean, like I literally have my job now because of those events I was doing. I cold emailed Kitchen Caboodle, which is a local chain of kitchen supply stores, like for home cooks here in Portland. And I released my book Black Friday weekend. And so I was like gung ho and ready to do holiday events that year. And so I saw that they were doing open houses for the holidays, and I emailed them and I was like, I know that you sell sous vide equipment. Can I come have a table at some of your open house events and I'll sample recipes from my book? And they were like, yes, please do. And so they set up, they put me next to the person who was demoing the sous vide equipment that they carry. And I talked to them, and it was Vesta Precision. And a little bit later, they actually connected me with somebody at the company at Vesta Precision, because they knew that they were looking for freelance recipe development. And that's how I got connected with them and was freelance for them for a while. And now I'm the director of marketing. So I literally would not have my job now if it wasn't for those events.
And Vesta Precision makes wonderful sous vide equipment, everyone. If you're in the market for a sous vide machine, check out Vesta Precision.
Yes, and you can DM Vesta Precision on Instagram too, and I can tell you more about it.
And you and I met through you working with the ISVA and Vesta being involved with that. And the whole reason I'm the president of the International Sous Vide Association is that I have a cookbook out that was the one that Mike gave to everyone that he knew that got into sous vide. He bought them my book as a gift. He was like, I want to put this association together. I need a sous vide expert to be a part of it. Maybe I'll reach out to Jason. And he cold emailed me, and we ended up forming a partnership and stuff like that. And none of that would have happened if he wouldn't have been giving away my book all the time.
Yes, exactly. Like, I mean, it's literally, like you said earlier, it's the best business card that you could ever imagine. It does so much work for you by existing.
Mike says he also loves the Vesta vacuum sealers. Don't want to forget
yes,
those.
Our chamber vacuum sealer, our vertical vac, is like truly my favorite thing in my kitchen. It's phenomenal. If you're curious about sous vide or do a lot of vacuum sealing, look into the vertical vac.
Very good with liquids. If you like making cocktails of any kind, it is perfect to hold large quantities of alcohol so that you can flavor however you want.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah, it's super fun.
So your book just came out on the Kindle. How far down the Kindle formatting rabbit hole did you go?
So this was actually an instance where I hired out, because I put off making it into a Kindle book for a year and a half because I didn't want to do it. And I was like, this is not, but I had people asking me, because for some reason, like there was a few folks in Canada who were having trouble getting my book, and then like somebody in Australia, like Amazon just didn't deliver to their area or something like that, and they wanted it. And I would have people inquire and be like, when is your book going to be available on Kindle? And I'm like, whenever I decide to learn how to do that. And so my friend who designed my book, I was like, can I just hire you to reformat my book for Kindle? Because I know I'm never going to do it. And so she did. And I frankly am so glad that she did that. Because yeah, again, I knew that I just wouldn't do it. So I did not go very far at all. I just approved it and proofread it. And then I actually have a virtual assistant now who helps me with some things, and she proofread it as well and pushed it out into the world.
That's awesome. Yeah, a lot of people run into trouble with the Kindle because I've been doing web development for 20 years now, and it reminds me of when I got started doing web development, that regardless of what computer you were on and what browser, like whatever you did looked different everywhere. And the Kindle is so much like that you create your cookbook that you love, that's this printed book, and everyone gets it the exact same. And then you try to format it on the Kindle, and it's like, well, is it a color Kindle or a non-color Kindle? Is it the Kindle app on their phone or the Kindle app on their computer? And you're like, it just blows up the kind of the options that you have. And so I started going down there, and I was like, no. And I went completely as dead simple as you can go, that just, title, image, instruction, like ingredients, just one after another, so it looks good everywhere. But I know some people spend a lot of time trying to tweak it to look perfect everywhere.
That was hard for me. Like I kind of had to give that up because I put so much work into my book looking a certain way. And I was like, well, we're just going to have to make do with what the Kindle product is. And luckily, I hope consumers know that when they're buying a Kindle cookbook, they are not going to be getting the same experience as the physical book. And that's the concession that you make. So I think that readers are kind of set up to expect that. And cookbooks are frankly, like, where did I read this recently? They're still like most people don't buy physical books anymore, but cookbooks, most people still buy that as the physical version. So I was just like, okay, this is essentially just going to be a recipe book, like as simple as a recipe book with a few photos thrown in. And I'm going to have to give up the design elements that I love so much.
Longtime listeners have heard this story before, but so many food bloggers say like, well, I'm going to put out a book, and they have a downloadable PDF. And I'm like, why don't you put that on the Kindle and do a print version? And they're like, well, I don't know how to do it. And so I did a poll on my Exploring Sous Vide Facebook group, which has 40,000 huge sous vide fans. And I also did it in a food blogger group. And I said, how many PDF downloads have you purchased in your life? How many Kindle books cookbooks have you purchased? And how many print cookbooks have you purchased? And it was something like 30 people had bought like PDF books, and they had bought like 45 PDF books. And they had the people that responded had bought like 10,000 print cookbooks. I was like 100 and something versus 10,000. Like, it is, why would you limit yourself to that small audience? And my favorite was in the blogger group who prompted this whole thing of bloggers only doing, downloadable PDFs. The first 3 responses were all, why would I buy a downloadable PDF? I only buy print books. And I'm like, then why would you not put one out?
Yes, exactly. You have to think, you have to meet your consumer where they're at. So like I would never buy a downloadable PDF. Like the only time where I've been like, I can see that making sense is a food blogger did one for like baby food. And it was more like 4 different techniques. So like ways, and I'm like, okay, that's so small that it couldn't be a book, but I understand why she wants to sell it. And that's like literally the only time I've been like, I get it. And so I think that, and like what a lot of food bloggers or people don't know is that PDF can so easily become a book. Like Amazon KDP makes it so easy to self-publish. Like, yes, you'll have to do some formatting tweaks, but they're probably not that extreme. And then you'll have a physical book, and there's very little effort on your part.
Yeah, I always say, like, you just spent 6 to 12 months writing the book, and now it's written. Spend 2 weeks to figure out how to put it out a print book. That it's not hard compared to writing an entire cookbook, which you've already done.
Exactly. Totally agree with you.
And of course, if people need help putting out a cookbook, you have a self-publishing course. I will promote yours since you have graciously shared all this information, and mine is not coming out for another month. So everyone for the next month, go to Chelsea's and make sure you take hers, and then you can come back for your second book and check out mine.
And you can always learn more from different people. Yeah. So mine is like, we're actually working now. The course isn't available. The self-guided course isn't available right now. We're working on where it's essentially going to be kind of like a mastermind style. I've been selling this course for a while because I had so many food bloggers reach out to me after I self-published. I did a podcast interview talking about it, and they were like, "How did you do this?" And I'm like, "Oh, I should share this information." But I had one of the students reach out to me, and she was like, "I feel like I need accountability and like I need my hand held." And I'm like, "I get that because this is massive." And she was just like overwhelmed by the sheer number of things to do. And so in this new format, it's going to be just one new topic every week, so that you just have one thing to think about, one thing to master before you move on to the next. So it's not like you're given this pile of work, like literally 6 months to a year of work all at once that you have to tackle. And so the idea is you could theoretically have a cookbook done by the end of it, if you really worked at it. But
if you care and you show up ready to work, you will have your book done
by the end of the course. Yes, exactly. And with the idea too is it'll be a relatively small group of people who are truly actually ready and committed to writing their book. So we are fully doing like an application process to this. And I will tell people like, I don't think that you have the time or whatever it might be to do this right now. So this isn't a good fit for you right now, but come back, in so long. But yeah, we're hammering out the final details now. So make sure to follow me on Instagram if you're curious. It's at a duck's oven. And I've actually been going a little crazy with creating reels lately. I love reels. I know a lot of people really don't like them, but I've been enjoying them quite a bit, about self-publishing. So you can kind of look through what I've created and start to get a feel for what that's going to be like.
I love your concept of needing some accountability, because I feel like food blogging in general is a pretty solitary pursuit, but I feel like writing a cookbook is even more so, that you're just in this rabbit hole of writing and recipes, and you're super excited to get started. And then when you're writing your 80th recipe, you're like, what was I thinking? Why am I doing this? And having a community that you can talk to and be there to support you and push you forward, be like, no, I feel that way too. You can do this. I've done it. I think that's something that will be really valuable to people.
Totally. And like one of my hopes too is that people will work together. So where, like you said, you had your parents proofread your book, so did I. And so hopefully those students within this group will be willing to proofread each other and like kind of support each other. And so, yeah, I think that just having people that are actually doing the same thing as you won't make it feel so lonely or so daunting. But
it could also help a lot with launch reviews of, if you know people that are, you've been working with, trying to get the books out, trying to get some review copies in their hands before the launch and allow them to review honest reviews of each other's books might be a really good way to kind of give it a little social proof when you launch.
Yes, it is shockingly hard to get people to review your book. I did not expect it to be so difficult. I was like, oh yeah, tons of like my followers and stuff will review no, it's pulling teeth to get someone to review. And sure, it's really similar for podcasts, like rate and review. It's very hard.
No one cares as much as I do. I don't understand why they don't care like I do.
Don't you know how important this is?
One of the things that I started to do, especially as I was putting out more and more cookbooks, is some people would generally review it, and I really appreciated that. So I would send them a review copy, normally a digital review copy, and I would also send them the main kind of takeaway points of what I was really proud of in the book. And if I had any concerns about the book, I'd put those in there. And that seemed to make it a lot easier for them to be like, oh, no, this makes sense. Like glancing through it and using it a little bit, but like now I have something to actually kind of base my review off of. And that worked pretty good.
That is so smart because, yeah, I think it's a lot of times people are like, I have to think of like, it's a thing I have to do. And so if you can make it as easy as possible, that's awesome. In fact, when I launched my book, I sent obviously a big email out to all my email subscribers, to my friends and family. And this is my marketing genes come on. And we actually talk about this a lot. in the marketing section of the course, but like one of the strategies that I had for ranking on Amazon was I asked everyone who I knew would do this for me, instead of just like straight up searching my book title on Amazon, to search sous vide cookbook or sous vide, scroll until they found my book, and to teach Amazon that my book was a good answer to that search query.
That's devious. I love that.
Oh yeah, I was like in it. I was like, okay, so this is how, because I just like did research about like how do you rank on Amazon. And so yeah, there's lots of little things that you can do if you've got people willing.
Yeah, we didn't even touch on the whole. Once you write your cookbook and it's on Amazon, your work is halfway over.
Yes. Exactly.
Here, sit there and no one will ever see it if you don't do all of the publicity and marketing. And that's true with a traditionally published book these days as well. The publishers almost never put any money or effort into promoting your book. You have to do it yourself.
And I think people don't. One thing that I've really been trying to tell people is so much is on you when you traditionally publish that you don't expect. And so you lose very little by going the self-publishing route. In fact, in my opinion, you gain more than you lose, because so much of it would be on you anyways. And for food bloggers, it's great that you have your blog, because your blog is a great platform to promote your book, because you can link to it, like your high ranking. I went to all my high ranking recipes and just added links to my book. And I need to update it. I usually have a little ad that just lives on my blog for my book. And so that's, anyways, lots of self-promotional things you can do.
I think that's a good point to end on, is you're going to have to do a lot of the same work yourself, regardless of how it is. So you might as well maximize your income and your control over your book to do exactly what you want.
I'm with you.
Well, Chelsea, I appreciate you coming on. It was fun talking about a different subject than sous vide and diving into the self-publishing process. I really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
And thanks for everyone tuning in and asking questions. Always appreciate those. This has been Makin Bacon, all about helping you serve your fans, grow your income, and get the most out of your blog. Till next time, I'm Jason Logston.